Hey there and welcome to BYJU'S 9th and 10th grade channel. I'm your teacher Aishwarya, and in this video of Concept Bites, we are going to be learning all the connective tissues at one go. Now, connective tissues in itself is a pretty vast topic because there are so many different things that we need to remember. So if you are here to revise this topic, or if you feel like this topic is slightly a bit intimidating, then you've come to the right place. Because by the end of this video, you will leave feeling confident about this topic. So without wasting any more time, we'll get started. Now, has it ever happened to you that you had to shift from one house to another house, and when you had to shift, you had to pack everything that was there from this house and move into house number 2? I'm sure at some point you would have seen this happen to us, or you would have seen it happening to your friends. Now, when this happens, you need to pack everything that is there in your house. And you can't just dump everything in a box. You will carefully pack it using maybe cardboard boxes, or you'll be using bubble wrap, so that later on, whatever you are unpacking and you move into a new house, everything is safe and sound and it is kept where it should be. Now, have you ever wondered why we use these packaging tools? Now, you'll tell me, I just want to make sure that whatever I am taking, whatever my belongings are, they need to be kept safe and protected. Now, how about our body? Our body is home to different kinds of organs, very, very important organs. And we often say, right, we find the digestive system in the abdominal region, we find the lungs in the chest cavity, or where we find the brain. But how exactly are all these organs at their place? Why aren't they not moving around from one place to another? Is it because something is actually keeping them in their position, something which is packaging and protecting them? Yes, of course, right? Otherwise, everything in our body would be going haywire. Now, apart from that, we see that there are so many different types of cells in our body. There are so many different parts. Now, although they are all present at different parts, we see that somehow there are ways in which it is connected so that it helps in our body to function effectively. So we see that there are structures that not only protect and keep them in place, but there are structures that connect and bind different parts of our body so that we are able to function effectively. Now, these are nothing but a group of tissues that we understand as connective tissues. So from the very name, connective means to connect, right? That is their primary function. So connective tissues are tissues that not only connect, but they support, protect, and provide structure to other tissues and organs in the body. Or a very simple definition that I would always use is that connective tissues are those tissues that connect and bind different parts of our body together. Now, connective tissues are a very diverse group of tissues, right? So we see that they are one among the vast and abundant types of tissues that we find inside our body. And broadly, we see that there are different types of it, but we broadly categorize them into 3, as loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, and fluid connective tissue. And under each category, if you notice, there are different types of tissues that we further see. But before I get to all of this, right? How is it that I am categorizing something as a loose connective tissue, a dense connective tissue, or as a fluid connective tissue? Well, this comes from a place of understanding a concept called as matrix. Now, normally we know that tissues that are there are nothing but they are a group of cells, right? And we know that these are a group of cells that are similar in structure and that perform a common function. Now, in the case of connective tissues, we see that these cells are found in a matrix, right? We see that they are found embedded in a matrix. Now, you'll ask me, ma'am, what is a matrix? Now, think of matrix as probably a ground substance, right? So, you could say that it is a ground, non-living substance, or a better word that I would use would be a medium, right? A medium, a space where those cells are found. Yes, and we see that they occupy the vacant spaces that exist between the cells. So if this is 3 cells, the space that you would find in and around it would be the matrix. So I hope we are clear on understanding what this matrix is. It is nothing but a ground non-living substance which is made up of some compounds, right, or some chemical substances you could say. Now, of course, the nature of the matrix is not the same for all connective tissues. In some cases, we observe that the matrix is jelly-like. While in some cases, we see that the matrix could be rigid. While in some cases, we see that the matrix could have a fluid nature. So in all these cases, different types of matrices exist, which is why we end up seeing different types of connective tissue. So in loose connective tissue, we see that the matrix is a little more jelly-like. In the case of dense connective tissue, we see that it's a little more dense and rigid with some depositions in it. Then, of course, you have fluid connective tissue where we see that the matrix is fluid. So on that basis, we see that there are subcategories into it. So under loose connective tissue, you see that we have areolar tissue and we have adipose tissue. Now under dense connective tissue, we see that we have bones and we have cartilage. Now along with that, we also see that we have ligaments and tendons. Now these ligaments and tendons could also come in a separate category of fibrous connective tissue as well, because their cells are a little more elongated and fiber-like. But nonetheless, they come under the broad category of dense connective tissue. Then last but not the least, we have fluid connective tissue, which includes your blood and lymph. And all these names that you see on the screen, they are responsible for connecting different parts of our body and binding it together. So let's understand each of it one by one. Now pause this video if you have understood everything, give yourself a pat on the back, and then you can proceed with the next set of it, where we will explore the different types in great detail. So now, of course, the first type we're going to explore is going to be loose connective tissue. And in this, we will look at the first type, which is areolar tissue. Now, whenever you talk about areolar tissue, I'd always tell you one thing. Think of bubble wrap, right? So if you don't know what a bubble wrap is, you can quickly have a look on the internet. But if you saw in the first video that we saw when we were talking about packaging, you saw there was a transparent sheet with some bubbles on it, which we like to pop occasionally. That is your bubble wrap. Now, what does a bubble wrap do? It protects, right? What we normally use the bubble wrap to sort of cover the important things that are there. It holds it in place, fills up the vacant spaces that are there in the box. Now, your areolar tissue is kind of like this bubble wrap. So we see that your areolar tissue acts as a packaging tissue, and it is present between the skin and the muscle, right? Now, what is the function of the areolar tissue? We see that it fills up space inside the organs, supports the internal organs, and in some cases helps with repair of tissues also. Now, you see that it has a wide range of functions. Now, why does it have a wide range of function? That has a lot to do with its structure, right? Now, of course, for grade 9 CBSE, this particular structural bit is not given elaborately, but I will tell you a brief bit about it. Now, when you talk about the structure, we see that it is made up of a network of fibers, right? So we see that it is made up of a network of fibers like collagen and so on. Then we also find various types of cells. So here we see that we find cells like mast cells and white blood cells. Yes? White blood cells, and they are all glued together in a gel-like matrix which has carbohydrates. We see that it has proteins and it has water in it, right? So that is why we say it is jelly-like. Now, if it is helping with repair or it is helping in getting rid of foreign particles, it is because of the presence of these cells, right, that are there, the white blood cells especially, and of course with the presence of collagen fibers, we see that they are able to achieve all of these functions. Now, on an examination point of view, function of areolar tissue is very important, so please star mark this point. Now, let's move on to the second kind of connective tissue, the loose connective tissue that we have, which is the adipose tissue. Now, adipose tissue tends to have another name, right? Not a very popular name, but I would say it is a very unpopularly popular name, and that is called as body fat, right? So we always refer to it as the body fat that is there. That's why I said it's unpopularly popular, because normally, oh, I think that this person has, some body fat, or normally you would hear people say that I think I have a little extra body fat here, things like that, right? That's why I said it's unpopularly popular. But this body fat or adipose tissue that is there is super, super important to our body, right? Very, very important. Now, when you look at its structure, yes, so when you look at the structure, we see that they are made up of cells called as adipocytes, or we call them as fat cells. Now, we see that these adipocytes store the reserve fat, right? So, they store it inside them as fat globules. And we see that this storage of fat is important because we see that it acts as a heat insulator. So it also helps in conserving heat within the body if the external temperature is too much, and also acts as a shock absorber and forms a padding under the skin. Now, if it forms a padding under the skin, we call this as subcutaneous fat, right? So we call this as subcutaneous fat. While we also see that there is fat that surrounds the kidneys and various important organs. Now, this is what we call as visceral fat. So this right here is just going to be some extra information on what is visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous, below the skin. Visceral, that is acting as a packaging for some important internal organs. So this is the structure, function and location of your adipose tissue. Now you will get a question on why is it that there are animals in the extreme conditions, like in the polar regions, which have a large thick layer of blubber. What is the function? So this is an application-based question that can come from adipose tissue. So please star mark this point so that it can help you out in the exams. So with this, students, we have covered all about loose connective tissue. So far, it's become very simple and easy for us. Let's move on to the next category, which is dense connective tissue. Now, dense connective tissue is a relatively simpler topic, but this is a topic which most students can get confused with. So please pay attention to the finer details that we are going to discuss. So in dense connective tissue, we see that there are various fibers that make up its matrix. And we have 4 categories of dense connective tissue, where we have bone, cartilage, tendon and ligament. So let's first get started with the bones, right? So we know whenever we talk about bones, right, we always use the terminologies, bones are hard, bones are rigid, right? And of course, we require bones to protect some important organs. So in this particular case of bones, we know that different types of bones are present in our body and they make up the skeletal system, right? Or what we say as the skeleton. Now, along with this, the bones and the muscles together also help us in movement. So this is a broad idea of what we already know about our bones. But let's understand the structure, the function and the location, right? So structurally, when we talk about the bones, we see that the bones are made up of a dense matrix, right? So we see that it is made up of a dense matrix which has depositions, right? So we see that they have depositions of calcium and phosphorus. Now we also see that in this matrix is where we find the bone cells, yes? So we see that we find the bone cells, which we call as osteocytes. Now some of you would have also heard the word osteoblasts. Osteoblasts that are there are basically nothing but the bone forming cells, right? So we see that they are the bone forming cells. And we see that these osteoblasts are what will eventually become your osteocytes. Now we see that the matrix of the bone that is there has organic as well as inorganic components in it. And of course, we see that they are richly supplied with blood vessels. Yes? So we see that they are richly supplied with blood vessels. So now we know why the bones are hard, right? Because of the depositions of calcium and phosphorus in the matrix of it. Now when you talk about the location, we know where the bones are found, right? They overall make up the overall framework of the body, right? And we see that the cells are embedded in this hard matrix. Now, of course, we see that the bones together that are there play a very important role in not only providing framework, but protection and also contributes towards movement. So these are the 3 things that we need to keep in mind when we are discussing about the bone, its composition and functions. Now next up, we have another category which is cartilage. Now cartilage that is there is found in the soft parts of the body. For example, the tip of the nose, which is very squishy. Or if you look at the outer ear, right, this particular part, we see that this is also pretty squishy. This is because all these structures are made up of cartilage. Now what is cartilage and how is cartilage different from a bone? Now, unlike bones, cartilage is not very rigid, right? So it is relatively non-rigid or less rigid, you could say. Now, when you look at its composition, we see that the cells of the cartilage or cartilage-forming cells are called as chondrocytes. Bone cells that are there are called osteocytes. Here they are called as chondrocytes. Now we see that they are found in a matrix which has various proteins and sugars in them. And we see that there are no blood vessels here. So we see that there are no blood vessels which are present here. Now, along with this, we see that the main function of the cartilage is to smoothen the surfaces, all right? Or I would say smoothen the bone surfaces at the joints. Now, we see here that apart from being present in the tip of the nose, ear, and parts of larynx and trachea, they are present at joints. Now, what are joints? Joints are nothing but the points at which two bones meet, right? So I'm just going to draw two bones here for your understanding. Yes? So now we see that these are two bones here. Now this is a particular joint. So this is bone 1 and this is bone 2. Now, at a particular point where two bones meet, if they are movable, right, they will constantly keep interacting and rubbing against each other. And when they do that, they are two hard, rigid surface. They can destroy each other, right? The surface at which they're meeting and they're constantly moving, we see that it could be subjected to some friction and it could be subjected to some wear and tear. Which is why we see that at such surfaces, we will find cartilage, right? So, we will find cartilage. Now, what does cartilage do? Cartilage will ensure that it will smoothen it out, right? So, when it will smoothen that surface, it will make sure that it will reduce the friction and thereby reducing wear and tear. Now, understand this, where exactly it is found. It is found at the bone surfaces. Key pointer, because later on you will get confused when we discuss ligament and tendon, right? So, they are found at the surface of the bone. Right? So now I hope we are all clear with what is bone and cartilage. Now, of course, I told you one very important function of the bones, right, is not only to provide framework, but it is also to help in movement. Now, we've earlier discussed that muscular tissue plays a very important role with movement. So how exactly is the bone and the muscle able to help us in movement? Now, it has to coordinate with each other, right? So, there should be something that will tie up the bones together, right? So that all the different, bones of our body can make up the skeleton. And along with that, it should coordinate with our muscular system, which is where your next set of connective tissues come into the picture, which is your tendon and ligament. Now, tendons are fibrous connective tissue that connect your muscles to bones. Remember this. Tendons are basically nothing but structures that connect. This is your muscle and it will connect it to the bone so that the muscle and the bone can work together. But of course, we see that when in this particular case, we see that it's very, very important that you remember how these are connected. So your tendon connects bone to muscle. Now, on the other hand, ligaments are structures which have a little more elasticity and we see that they connect bone to bone. So, we see that if there are two bones, right? So, if I again draw a rough structure, we see that a structure which will connect the two bones together, not at the surface, but rather they are connecting two bones together, we call this as a ligament. So, mainly functions of ligament and tendon will come to you with respect to compare and contrast. So, you need to remember this particular point, especially on an examination point of view. So with this, if you see, we've covered the next very big topic, which is dense connective tissue. By now, you'll realize all this is very simple and easy, right? So then we will move on to the last type of it, which is fluid connective tissue. So here we see that in fluid connective tissue, we see that the matrix is fluid in nature, right? And we see that there are cells which are found suspended in this fluid matrix. And the best example that is there is nothing but blood, right? So blood is one example of fluid connective tissue. Now, blood is a fluid that is responsible for transporting oxygen, nutrients, and various other substances to different parts of the body. So it not only helps in transporting different parts, but also connects those different parts. Now, if you see the fluid matrix that is there is what we call as plasma. And plasma is mainly made up of water and other components that are there. Now, along with that, we see that there are blood cells which are found embedded, right? Now, these blood cells are not embedded, they are found suspended, yes? So, in this case, we see that we have the red blood cells which are discoid or disc-shaped that help in transport of oxygen. We see that we have white blood cells that are there which play a very important role in the body's defense. Then we have platelets that play a very important role in blood clotting. So in case if there has been any damage in the body, any wound that is there, we know that there could be loss of blood from that wound. So our platelets are responsible for sealing it. And we have already discussed the important functions of blood. But we also have another kind of fluid connective tissue which is lymph. Now, lymph is a kind of fluid tissue, or it's a fluid connective tissue that is kind of originating with the help of your blood. So there are times when some of this plasma and the white blood cells, they will ooze out of the, the channels, the blood vessels, right? The plasma and the blood vessels, they will ooze out, resulting in the formation of lymph, right? So in this particular case, we see that lymph is also an important fluid connective tissue made up of plasma and white blood cells that play a very important role in the body's defense. So these were just some important pointers for all of you to remember with respect to the connective tissues and lymph, right? We will explore the topic of lymph in your higher grades, of course, but it's just for your understanding. So with this, students, we come to the end of today's class. Now, like I said, connective tissues is very simple and easy, and you have recalled all the connective tissues at one go. Now, if you found this helpful for your revision, do let me know in the comments of this video. If you have any specific doubts, please do let me know. I will definitely be answering you. But if you like the way we teach and you like these small concept bites that we do for you that helps you with revision, please do not forget to hit the like button, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. Thank you so much for being a part of this class. I will see you soon, but up until then, take care, lots of love, and bye-bye.